Welcome to another episode of the 905er podcast with myself, Roland Tanner, and
I am Joel McLeod.
And we're also welcoming back today for the second time this week, Shannon Gillies, who is a former candidate in Burlington and has been involved in a number of issues in the city over the years, and is always an insightful commentator on social media and elsewhere. Welcome back, Shannon.
Thank you. Thanks for having me again.
And the episode today, we thought we would talk about something that all three of us have done, which is to be candidates and to be involved with other people who are political candidates. And a bit about our experiences. All three of us were personally unsuccessful, but doesn't. I also think the fact. Well, I don't know. I mean, if either of you have plans to run again, but I also think we're wise enough to have come through the experience and to have learned what we needed to learn, and not necessarily be lining up to have to do it again. So we were asked right back at the start of the podcast, one of the suggestions we got from our listeners that we might do an episode like this and kind of talk about what it's like, both to be that candidate, to be the person with their face on the leaflet, and the backroom people who make campaigns work. So Shannon, we'll start off with you, just because you wrote a great article back in, was it 2018? I think
I don't even remember. Probably.
I think it was around the time of the election when I was running.
I think so.
And you ran as a candidate in the same ward as I was running in, actually, Ward 2 in Burlington. What was that, 2010-ish?
2010.
Wow,
10 years ago.
Yeah, it seems amazing.
We're all so young back then.
And you didn't have you were very frank about not enjoying the process one bit, and
I enjoyed some things. I enjoyed some of it.
Okay, well, correct me. Take us through a bit about what it was like and what your experience was.
Oh goodness. So earlier in 2010, I guess I had decided that I would run. I'd always been following the issues generally, and I don't know if you remember what it was like back then, but the counselors were generally older and male, and I'd always lived in Burlington and had lived in the downtown area for most of my adult life, and I just felt like my experiences were a little bit different. Just working downtown, living with other people my age, it just felt like we weren't really represented. So that was kind of the main reason I decided to run. So I signed up, not really knowing, I guess, what I was getting myself into. I had talked to people before who had told me, if you just go out and meet everybody, if you go to every door, you have a really good chance of winning, because it's really just about, who people can relate to and like. And I thought I was a level-headed person who, could think through a problem and just make decent decisions. And I sort of thought that was what would make a good candidate. But I think I can do this. I know the area and I know the issues, and I thought that would be enough. Once I got in there, I realized that wasn't enough. There were people who knew a lot more than me who were running. And I realized how important specific issues were to our area and how passionate people were about those issues. So it was a good learning experience. And in general, people are nice. I mean, most of it wasn't bad, but people have really high expectations of their candidates, as I'm sure you realize too. And then the questions got really tough, and questionnaires were coming in every day. And it was a little overwhelming to know how to answer every question. And I think what was really challenging was that people expected you to have a firm stand on every single issue, which I still don't believe is really necessary, because I think you need to explore issues as they come along. And I don't think candidates should have a firm stand on every single issue. I think they all need to be hashed out. I think you need to hear from all sides. And so I think that was one of the most frustrating things, was that people really expected you to be black and white on so many different issues.
And it becomes part of the game you play. And this is my kind of big theme at the moment is how politicians kind of get forced. They don't get forced because they don't have to do it. And if they work hard enough, they can avoid it. But it's very difficult to avoid going down different roads. If someone's asking you for a black and white answer, then the easy route is to give them a black and white answer, preferably the one that they're going to agree with. Yeah. Anyhow, and it would be so easy to say different things on every doorstep on the street. Frankly, win them all over. I didn't do that, I promise. It's an interesting phenomenon. Were you like your own kind of campaign manager, or did you have a team?
I was a one-woman show. I don't know if you've ever seen. I don't know if you've ever seen The Modern Family, where Claire decides to run for city council. The mother.
Oh, right.
I really related to that, because you sort of think all your friends are going to get behind you, and at first they're really excited you're running, and then when it really comes down to everyone coming out to helping you, a few of them start to drop off. I had some good helpers, but you really realize that you're the one that has to do all the work, which is
it really is like a passion project. I've discovered over the years, like it's not you. It is a question of, if you really want it, you've really got to go and get it. And I agree with your assessment though, Shannon, of you might find like there's usually one or two issues that you're passionate about, whether it's, something that there's always something that's like a catalyst to get you wanting to run. You say, I see a problem. There's a problem here, either not enough representation or the policies on a certain matter are, I don't think they're very good. We need to improve them. Whatever the case may be, there's usually one or two issues that get you motivated to want to jump in the fray. And then you realize your issues that are passionate to you, they're passionate to a couple other people, but there's a whole lot of other issues that people are equally as passionate about. And it's really hard to say to them, no, your issue isn't as important as the reason why I'm running. Because you realize, no, it's pretty important to you. It's pretty like, it could be hospital funding. I'm spitballing here. I'm just pulling something out. They're really passionate. They want better funding for hospitals, but you're more passionate about sustainability. Now, how can you say that your issue is more important than that person's issue? You can't. It's they're both equally bad. It's just that's not the catalyst for why I jumped in the fray, so to speak.
Exactly. And that's the question, you think, well, why am I running? Am I running because of I want to push the issues I think are important, or am I running to really represent the majority of people whose views might be different from my own, which I found that they actually were. A lot of people thought a lot differently than I did. And it makes you examine, do I want to do this? Do I want to be the representative for a bunch of people who may not have the same views that I have?
And it's that dichotomy of should a politician reflect the electorate or be a leader of the electorate? And I've heard both points of view from people I very much respect. And I guess the answer is kind of both. And that you're elected, the people who elect you obviously have their priorities, and they elect you expecting you to pursue them. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, you do have a responsibility to not take the easy road every single time. It's a difficult one, and I see how that arrogance of the people who've been elected and who've been in power for a time, that sort of disease of, I know so much more than you. You can't hope to tell me anything that I don't know 1,000 times more than you do about. You're kind of worthless to me. You see how that creeps in, because they do know so much more, but you've always got to keep in mind that I don't care that they know less than I do. It's them; they're my boss, not the other way around. Their priorities are their priorities, regardless of whether I like their priorities, and I guess that comes back to your point, Joel. Actually, it's a difficult one to explain, but if you can't run, I felt this very much in the election that I ran in. It's like you can't run in the election you like to run in. You have to run in the election you're in.
That's it.
The last election was about one very overwhelming issue, which was downtown development. I was like, but you can't. You got to go with that, and you've got to find if the electorate is saying overwhelmingly one thing, then you have to find the road that allows you to work with that and to reflect that objective in a completely honest way. I'm not talking about throwing your principles out the window. It's understanding where things are going and making sure that you're reflecting that in a kind of responsible way.
I find that in the middle of the fight of, I have my reasons, I have my passions and my reasons for running, and they're the ones that I get up in the morning to fight for. But then you have the other side of, I have people who have other priorities, and that they're equally as valid. Is in that middle ground is where you come into the equation as the candidate's personality. Because that's the one thing that everybody talks about, but nobody really talks about. Everybody wants to talk about policy and whatnot. I think a person's personality goes a long way in a campaign. Because I've seen people who are dumb as bricks get elected because they're really likable. And I've seen people who are smart as a whip, and I'm like, my God, this person knows everything about everything, get voted out because they're just so unlikable as a personality.
And good candidates lose all the time, particularly in Ward 2, apparently. No comment about the current incumbent or the previous one at all whatsoever. Staying well clear of that one. But it is. I mean, the first thing you have to accept when you go into it is good candidates lose all the time, and the reason that people win is just dumb. It's usually being in the right place at the right time more than anything else. It's all about timing, which is why I ran last time. Like, personally, it was completely inconvenient. But it's like, well, if I'm ever going to run, you got to go when there's a vacancy. It's so much easier to get elected in municipal politics if there's no incumbent, because you're overcoming that name recognition thing is just absolutely huge. But again, that's the kind of thing that I guess Joel and I had probably learned from being involved in other elections.
Oh, yeah.
That we had that kind of experience of, like, I knew how to run a campaign, and I didn't win, but I feel like I ran a pretty good campaign because I'd seen exactly how it was run. I knew what you had to do on election day. I knew what how to operate all that stuff, which I actually learned first of all from Joel. When Joel, you were campaign manager for candidate in Burlington, Carmel Sacran, which is where I first met you.
Yeah.
And what's your experience? I mean, a campaign manager, for those who don't know, in an election, the candidate, the person you're electing, comes very much down the totem pole after the campaign manager. They are the boss, and they whatever the campaign manager says is what the candidate does or faces the consequences. Yeah. How did you find that, Joel?
It's pretty apt. Like I kind of discovered pretty fast that because I was also working in a party situation. It wasn't just we weren't just an independent organization. There's also a provincial political party backing us, and so I had other people who I was accountable to. They were asking, like, how are things going? Do you need money? Do you need resources? Can we send volunteers? Can we, et cetera, et cetera? And I'd have to be on top of you have to be on top of your game. And you have to know pretty much every aspect of the operation. You really are the CEO, if you will, of a pretty much maybe a month long, ideally longer than that, maybe a 2 or 3 month long operation. And you have to know, like, how much, pretty much down every day, how much expenses are you expending every day? The sad thing is, money is the lifeblood of any political operation. As much as we want to say, policy matters, in the end, I regret to inform our listeners, it doesn't. It's money. You can have the best
during a campaign.
You just bleed through so much money quickly. Like you're because you're constantly sitting there going, I need to buy a billboard. I need to buy posters. I need to buy postcards. And then now I need to figure out the postage to send them out to people. Do I have volunteers? No. Okay, I got to buy postage. Well, how much is that going to cost? Multiply that. Da, 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 da. And you realize how quickly you're just running out of money. And it'd be nice as the campaign manager to just go and call up a few people. Hey, can you donate? I need $1,000 from you. Can you donate $1,000? Can you donate $1,000? Say no, but I want to talk to the candidate. Oh, well, great. They're out knocking on doors. Okay, I got to go call them and say, hey, can you talk to this guy and just really suck up to them so that they can get it? It's an ugly truth, and I've never seen any campaign, whether you're NDP, Liberal, or Conservative, that doesn't operate that way. I mean, you have your pool of people, but you ultimately you have to go and talk back, go talk to them and say, I need money from you.
And it's often hard to get the money if people don't see you on the winning side, as a campaign manager for a candidate running against Marianne Mead Ward, and you'd ask for money and everyone would think, well, Marianne Mead Ward's going to win, obviously.
Right.
And it's hard. It's hard to get money.
But it's hard.
And just generally, political donations. It's like, well, if I'm going to give money to something, I'll give it to the local dog's home 100 times before I give it to you. Even if I am going to vote for you and I think you're basically the good guys, I'm still not enthusiastic enough that I want to part with.
I mean, I know I don't like giving money to political campaigns. I'd rather give it to a million other things. So I actually give credit to people who do cough up a lot of money of their own money because, they're really not getting anything for it.
Well, you get tax credits, which is, but that tells its own story.
You don't for the municipal ones.
No, you don't.
No.
But the municipal election, it is, that's where your real passion and personality comes into play. I ran for a school board trustee, and that was asking people for money. Like you're going to friends and family first, and then you might get a couple of people that you're like, they're like, oh, I really like what you have to say. Okay, I'll give you a couple bucks, here and there. But I mean, you're talking to really, really organize a campaign and to really have the ability to kind of put into practice what you're imagining requires a lot of money. And to the point where I'm honestly of the opinion, like, I think it's becoming a problem. I know we've removed union and corporate donations from our political process. The problem is the costs have not gone down. And I think it's just the ways that political parties are forced to fundraise for money. It's becoming detrimental. Money is just.
It's a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation, because obviously the big irony of taking corporate money out of politics in some ways has been that it's a lot cheaper to bribe a politician now. Now, I don't mean that seriously, but money talks, and any politician in any country in the world will know their biggest donors, and when there's no corporate and money anymore, then the $500 is your biggest donor now, which is a very small amount of money.
That's incorrect, Roland. Your biggest donor now is your third-party donors, and we saw that not only provincially, but we also saw that in the recent municipal election here in Burlington. Is that the problem with doing that is that now that if any one of us is a multi-millionaire, there's nothing stopping us from buying up every billboard in town and putting up, hey, I want you to vote for, Shannon Gillies for Ward 2. I could put up every billboard that every time you drive through Burlington, no matter where you are, you see a big billboard, and it just has to say, paid for by Joel McLeod in a tiny little fine print in the corner, and it's legal. And
I don't know why they did that. I have to wonder if that whole thing is going to be scrapped.
It should be. It should be. I don't know why they. Yeah,
I brought up to a few people like, why don't we pass laws just banning it? Like I know in the UK, Roland, maybe you can attest to this. I've only read it that like TV ads and billboard ads, print ads are banned in campaigns because the idea is that the candidate gets enough press coverage, right? Like the press is going to cover your main party candidates and whatever they have to say. So if your candidate screws up, it gets on the news, all that. Plus with social media, you can follow and tweet and Facebook and Instagram all you want on that. There's not really a need to go spend money on a 30-second ad spot that doesn't really communicate anything to you. And you're not going to be able to discuss the nuance of a immigration policy or taxation policy in a 30-second ad spot. It's just my leader or my candidate is up on the screen for 30 seconds. My understanding is
it gets rid of the attack ads. So the rule is you can have billboards and printed stuff. So there are printed ads, and during there are famous political billboards in Britain the same way there are famous political ads in Canada. Like Margaret Thatcher had a very famous one, which was designed by the Saatchi family, who are like big art donors now. It was like Britain's not working, in a big lineup of people on the dole, which was very ironic because those lines were a lot bigger about 2 years later. But there are no TV ads, which I have to say, when you move to a country which has them, you're like, oh, geez, these suck so bad. Plus, you're seeing them thousands of times, and it's just the lowest of the low kind of political rhetoric,
Municipally, I'd rather see budgets overall reduced. If they're $20,000, I'd rather see them at $10,000. I just, like you said, Joel, with social media, you can do so much advertising that way. And I'd love to see lawn signs scrapped. I mean, they're an environmental disaster.
That's a good, they are. Yeah, you want to see someone with the courage to say
the budget. You could really reduce the budgets a lot.
As a campaign manager, that was the bane of my existence: buying lawn signs, and then afterwards, you're like, what do I do with them? Yeah. Like they're environmental. They are environmentally bad. The worst city I've ever seen for lawn signs is London, Ontario. If you want to see a complete, that's my dog. Sorry. If you want a complete disaster in terms of a policy, go check out London, Ontario in any election, municipal, federal, provincial, doesn't matter. Just go drive by. They allow lawn signs on anything and anywhere. And it's
awful.
It just looks so bad. And I remember driving through the election. My brother lives in London. I went to visit him in the last election. And I was just driving through and I was like, oh my God, this place looks like, it just looks tacky.
Well, I think Oakville still allows that. Doesn't it?
Yeah, Oakville's very similar. Yeah, I don't know if there's some places they don't allow them, but no, you'll get those central
the boulevards or
where we like literally 1,000 lawn signs for candidate X on them. Well, maybe 500. Yeah, like a lot though. But and you spend so much time of your kind of volunteer time putting these signs up.
Every campaign I've worked on, there's the sign chair. There's always that one volunteer whose job it is, all they do is put up signs. I used to be that. I did that for Patty Torsney's campaign, my very first election campaign, and it's fun. You get out of the office and you're just hammering spikes in the ground and drilling holes and putting up signs all over the place, but they're a costly little venture, and I'm not convinced that they do any work. I'm really not. I don't.
What they do is depress the hell out of the candidate.
Yeah. Yes.
Say that again. Yeah.
I think the one time I really kind of lost it, and if Lisa Kurz is listening to this, she'll enjoy this. It was just like there's one Sunday, like about a month before it was over, or maybe even less than that, and it was like, oh my God. And I had streets where I was doing really well, but the street that I actually live near, which is New Street, she just absolutely killed me on New Street. I had to go past it every day. I was like, oh, this sucks. I'm just going to get my ass handed to me.
And you did. So that is a self-fulfilling prophecy.
I got it respectably handed to me. It wasn't.
Okay, so I'm gonna turn the tables now because this is. Shannon, why don't you tell us what was the positive experience of running? What did you learn about running that you didn't know before that you would say maybe positively influenced your life going forward?
It's a good question. I learned how engaged most people actually are. A majority of people. I sort of thought I had paid more attention to city issues than a lot of my neighbors, but a lot of people were really quite in tune, and it was nice to see that. I learned a lot just about the city, about how it runs. I learned that we actually have a really competent city staff. At least that was the situation back then. And I was actually impressed at how much work gets done behind the scenes. And they were all very gracious in helping me as a candidate. I don't know if you felt that the same way, Roland, when you ran.
Absolutely, yeah. No, absolutely.
And just overall, I just had a good experience about the strength of our community. There were definitely nasty people from everywhere, but that's the case anywhere. But overall, I realized that we actually have a good fabric in our community and of a lot of people engaged in different ways.
It's an interesting point, having done both provincial, federal campaigns and the municipal one. The municipal one is taking party politics out of it just makes it completely different. And that you're having a conversation on every doorstep about policy. It has to be about policy, because it can't be about what color party you're is or what your leader's doing, because they don't exist. So it's complete. Now, at those other levels, the candidates will generally get into more interesting conversations than a volunteer like I would do. However, even if you're about to win the election, 60% of the doors don't want to talk to you. And that's just assuming the doors of people who are actually going to turn out and vote, which is only 60%. So the vast majority of doors at any election, even the one where you're going to have a landslide and you win, you're not welcome before the door is even open because they don't like your party, which doesn't leave you much space for any kind of conversation. And in any case, at that level, it's all about IDing the vote. It's not about persuading. And municipally I really, really enjoyed canvassing. And people who know I'm not the most extrovert guy in the world, find that surprising. But I loved knocking on doors, and those conversations were just fantastic. And there were people invited me in for particularly on the hot days. You got invited in for a glass of water. Someone came and saved me when I was just about to expire. I mean, it was like the memories you build up. I had some really funny stories as well.
Yeah.
That I don't know if it's just there's nothing. Apparently, every candidate meets the naked person at some point, and a naked person wasn't fully naked, but was playing a saxophone.
Oh God!
while wearing not very much. I was like, oh wow. Well, there was another story. Well, I'll save that for another day. But yeah, that was really refreshing. And yeah, how well informed people are, because the traditional thought is no one's interested in municipal politics. And yet here people are talking about really detailed stuff.
And they should be. Municipal politics is the one level where it really affects everyone's daily lives. And so people should be engaged.
I've always kind of walked the one thing working in politics for a long time. And then, I ran for a little bit, is that you kind of realize the theater of it a little bit. And by what I mean by that is everybody assumes that politicians hate each other with a visceral passion, that, oh my God, Shannon Gillies is useless and doesn't know her left from her right. I'm not saying that, just using your name as an example. But in reality, a good many people running and who are elected actually do like each other.
Yes.
And there's a great deal of the policy is one thing, but the personalities stay at the personalities form friendships. We may disagree about policy, but that's just it. It's just policy. It's not, a life or death situation that the media tends to balloon up into it. Now you can disagree with the policy, say that's a bad choice. That's a bad decision. Fine. Do you think that person making it is a horrible person? Not necessarily. I've rarely met anybody in politics that would honestly say you're a very bad person. Most people, I think, are trying to do the best with the information that they have, and they have their own set of beliefs, and they all want to do best. We can disagree, and that's why we have elections. When we think you've done a bad job, we we vote you out like somebody new. Hopefully it's better. But it's one of those things that when you run and you work, you realize that the media, the mainstream media, if I can use that term, perception of, oh, it's like everybody hates this party hates that party, and oh, if that person's the leader, they must be the most horrible person. No, I mean, I know I give Doug Ford a hard time on this podcast. I don't think he's in his personality, he's a bad guy. I really don't. I don't think he's a guy that I'd be like, oh my gosh, this man is dangerous. I think he's made bad decisions. I don't think he has. I think he has the right motivation to help people, but I think he's in over his head, truth be told. And when you have a province this size and an economy of this size, sometimes you just have to accept I'm in over my head and walk away. And that's the frustrating part is, Doug, it's okay to ask for help. You're not any less of a man for doing so. And when he doesn't, then that's where we have a right to disagree and say, I think you need better advice.
Yeah. Joel, I think you made a good point just about the civility in politics. And I think a lot of people would be surprised to know that candidates, at least in Burlington, how much they had met each other, called each other, gone for coffee. And it was a very civil process. Oh, the time I ran and also the time I helped some other candidates running. And, where is it incivility or uncivility? The lack of civility happens is, on social media.
Right.
And when I was running in 2010, that was really, I think, kind of the first municipal election where Facebook and Twitter were a factor. And that's where I got very sensitive,
right?
Personal attack.
Yeah.
And now I realize that if you're going to run, you have to be ready for that.
Yes.
But that's where the personal attacks happen. It's kind of behind closed doors when people can't see who's throwing out the criticism. And it's become far more prevalent, in the elections that ensued. And it's a real problem because I think it discourages good people from running. And I think it's going to continue to do that.
Oh, you're absolutely right. And I think the sad thing is those people who like to be the trolls online, who like to throw the personal insults at you as a candidate, I feel bad for them because I like to say you are not educated enough to say to somebody, I disagree with your policy. Like, there are times when, you as candidate, Shannon, I'd say, well, I don't think that's the right idea. I don't think that, given the information that we all have, I think you're making the wrong decision to go forward. Am I going to sit there and say, Shannon, you're horrible and you're worthless and you're the scum of the earth? No, because I see that you're making the best decision based on the information that you have. I'm making my best decision on what I have, and you know what? Chances are it's probably somewhere in between.
But you always keep it about the issues, Except Donald Trump. He's the one person I'll attack on a personal level.
It's the most important thing. I mean, actually, I was just thinking that the election night I took part in, it's interesting that the two there was one candidate in particular, maybe two, who got a little bit into kind of personal attacks, and they were the least experienced people, with the least. Well, one in particular with the least chance of winning. And it's almost like they felt, well, this is what politics is supposed to be like, isn't it? We throw mud at each other and we call each other crooks. It's like, no, you don't have to do that. No. It's no obligation to go down that road.
There's the story I share from the very, very, very first campaign I ever volunteered on. It was with Patty Torzini. She was running for re-election here in Burlington. And Rick Goldrake, who later became mayor, but at the time he was running as the Green Party candidate. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, this guy's got like no hope of winning, and he's just some kind of flake, kook candidate running for the Green Party. And it was interesting because you could see Rick had an opinion, and they were well-informed opinions. And it's one of those things like I didn't necessarily agree with the opinions, but I liked him as a human being. Like I tell, like he's very educated, and he's a genuinely nice guy, and he's approaching the job from an opinion of, I want to help my community and my country as a whole. And I was like, there's something admirable about that. Didn't necessarily agree with all of his policies. Some I did, some I didn't. But it was kind of an eye opener for me of like this. It's a theater, it's a theater that unfortunately most of us get sucked into. And to talk to, to want to talk to somebody and say, where is it that I can, where's our common humanity? Where's the part that I can reach out and say, okay, I can get behind that. Like I always say that, George W. Bush, I see why people liked him. I kind of like him. He's a nice guy. He's a guy that I would honestly have in my backyard for a barbecue and talk baseball with. I wouldn't want him leading me into a global war, but it's one of those things, like, I get why people liked him. I really do. And I got why he was reelected. There's a likability to him, and there is that bit of likability. There's a likability to people like, Doug Ford and the like, and that's kind of where, if you kind of take away that theater and just sit down and just figure out what the likability, I mean,
it would be nice if politicians could all agree to get away from the, particularly at a federal and provincial level, from the kind of gang warfare aspect of it, where this is why in many places you will find the Liberals and the NDPers dislike each other much more than they respectively dislike the Conservatives, because they both recognise that the other party is working their way to where they want to be. And it's like, this is crazy. It's two parties which have very similar objectives, very similar routes to whatever they see as their promised land, who have volunteers spitting bile each other on social media. It's like such a waste of energy, and such a pointless. And for those people who are not interested in politics, it just turns them off.
I was going to say, it makes people tune out, which is a really, dangerous and unfortunate consequence of what's happening. Right. Like, I just wonder where it's going to go. Is it going to get any better, or is it just going to get worse at all levels, each election? I just think, what's the next federal election going to be like? Is it going to be all personal attacks? Because that just makes people tune out altogether.
I mean, the last federal election was a real low point. In my experience.
I remember.
I don't think that next one's going to be much better.
It was, yeah. I mean, it was a election about nothing. It was just all personal and dirty, and just like, I didn't really help out with it, because I was just like, I was going to, and then I was like, no, I don't want this one. I don't want. I just feel dirty after volunteering on it. Which says something about how bad it was, because I actually like volunteering on elections. But I'm going to switch gears again, and I throw one last question up before we say goodbye. What advice would you give to somebody who's listening to this podcast now, who's thinking about running federally or provincially or even municipally down the road? Because in my opinion, if you are thinking about doing that, now's the time right now to start your planning, which is kind of why we did this episode now. So Shannon, I'll throw it over to you first for your advice.
I would know too much about running as a federal or provincial candidate, but just at the municipal level, I would say a lot of people think that you need to learn, start reading and learning now. I think that did not help me. A lot of people think that, they need to know everything about everything. And that was my instinct, was to learn everything about the city, learn the official plan inside out. And it really wasn't about that. It was really about finding out what people are concerned about. Really, and I would advise anybody, probably at any level, whatever they want to run for, is to really go out and talk to people first. Make it come from those people rather than yourself. And I would say even it's probably the wrong reason to run, because of the issues you're concerned about yourself. It really should be about what's going on in the community, and develop your campaign from that.
Yeah, you've got to be passionate. You've got to have that passion, and you've got to actually get back to the question. The question Joel asked was, "What is the advice?" And my advice would be to go volunteer on someone else's campaign, because that certainly helped me. And again, I didn't win. However, I do think. I think I did as well as I did because of the experience I had. And the other thing was that I knew that the only way you're ever going to win is by knocking on as many doors as possible. And I think, again, I think if I'd taken a less aggressive road on knocking on doors, I would have done a lot worse. It's that personal connection that if you can be on someone's doorstep and be a reasonably likable kind of person, they'll maybe remember you when they get into that box, because it's people meet politicians so seldom, and it's the only way that you're ever going to make a significant impact. I mean, we all spend thousands of dollars on leaflets and lawn signs, but it's like, well, who the hell is Roland Tanner? He's got the most colorful signs, but that doesn't mean I'm going to vote for him. What does that mean?
Well, people remember the people who come to their doors.
Yeah. So it's like, get a strong pair of shoes and go see how someone else does it. I think that's probably the most practical advice.
I was going to say, watch every episode you can of The West Wing on Netflix, and then do the exact opposite. Because the notion, I think too many people have it in their heads of I'm going to stand at the podium, I'm going to stand at the microphone, I'm going to give this barn burner of a speech, and people will flock to me and they'll bring up my cause and I'll be a leader of men. And it doesn't work that way. Everything that both you, Roland, and you, Shannon, have just said is bang on. Any successful politician I've ever met in any party, they won because they knocked on doors. And more importantly, they remember names. The number of times a politician won wasn't necessarily because they knew all the answers. They knew all the intricacies of the bureaucracy. They knew somebody's name. They walked up and they saw some obscure person that they hadn't met once or twice. They said, "Hey, Joe, how's the family? How's the business doing?" And that will go so much further than any speech or any.
Bill Clinton, right? Bill Clinton. But why he was such a successful politician was he remembered people. He remembered their stories.
You remember that you remember that person's story, and you remember who they are. And they will go on and they will be your greatest accolade. They will go on and they will go tell their friends, their family, and they will tell them that you need to vote for person X because they know me. I'm their buddy. And that's every successful politician at any level I've ever met has done that exceptionally well. And that's their secret to success, is that they've gone out and they've made enough personal connections with people that they would do that. The second thing I would recommend, and this is more just a personal preference, actually have a job. Like don't go into politics thinking that this is going to be have a job, like do something. Because the number of young people that go into politics because they knew somebody or know somebody that I don't really like those.
Well, that's a really good point. Well, and you see it all the time. Some really nice, well-meaning people, but they are. I feel that it's like, why do you want to be a politician when you're 25? No. Karina Gould, who's currently the MP in Burlington, was under 30 when she was elected. So there are exceptions to every rule.
But she had a job. She did something with her life that she had some expertise on. And I'm thinking there are people at different levels of government. I'm not going to name names, but when you look at their resume, you realize, no, you graduated from your university and then you went volunteered on one or two campaigns and you sucked up to the right person in your riding and they put you in the nomination slot for that party's riding. And then you've been there since you were the age of 25. That's not a career like that. You don't know anything outside of what it's like to yell at people across an aisle, which I think goes back to our previous conversation about the civility of politics. The people who've actually been out in the real world, who've done jobs, who've built careers, I'm not talking like the lawyers and the doctors. I'm talking like your social workers, your people who have formed community groups on the ground to help the less fortunate. Any kind of career that you've done work, you've built something, and you've gone out and you interacted with people that you don't necessarily all agree with, those people are successful. Those people have so much more knowledge and people knowledge that they bring to the table that you're like, that's what I want in my leader, at the municipal, provincial, or federal level. That's what I want. I want that person who says, my experience on the ground says this policy doesn't work.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, actually, so the candidate you helped out, Shannon, was Kimberly Calderbank, who was also in the same ward as I was. She's a good example of the opposite. Someone's young who has a business very well, has done all sorts of other things. So it's not the age per se. It's that kind of deciding almost before you want to go to university that you want to be a politician. You've already bought your suit and you've got your picture taken and it's on your Twitter account. It's like, dude, get a life. You got to be able to bring some other stuff to this. It doesn't necessarily take decades to build that up. I mean, for me, because I'm a slow developer, at 48, I finally felt like, okay, I think I know enough that I can do this and not make a fool of myself. But if you just want to get into politics because you want to get into politics, you got a problem. It doesn't. You are the last person who should be running.
I agree. I think a good candidate should almost be someone who has such a good job and is doing so well at what they're doing that you almost ask, why would you want to give that up? To be a politician?
Yeah.
Because that tells me that they really care and are probably doing it for the right reasons
and have thought about it. Yeah. No, it's a really good point. And we're at the end of we need to wrap this up because we've really gone on. But at the end of the last election, it's like, well, I hope in 4 years I'm not in a position where I'm just doing it again because it's fairly close and blah blah blah. It's like, no, I don't want to do that. I want to be doing it because it feels like the right thing to do. And the best outcome of that whole thing is that as a result of being a candidate, I now understand a lot more about the actual job of what happens after election day if you win. And that is a whole other kettle of fish. You really, all those people out there who think, I just want to get into politics because I want to be in politics, you really need to question whether you want to be involved in. It's a tough job.
You actually want to do that job for 4 years. It is a hard job. And every candidate needs to ask themselves that if they're really ready to take on that role.
It's thankless, and it forces, I think, I've numerous times I've thought, what would I have done if I had won? And I think some of the decisions would have been very different to what I think are the right decisions now, having not won. And that's a really interesting kind of experience. It's like, I think I would have done X too, because I think I would have felt completely forced to. And it would have, I would have justified it in my own mind as like, clearly we have to do this. Or I certainly know I would have made some decisions in the first few weeks and months that would have been dreadful. Anyway, we've gone on long enough. Thank you so much, Shannon, for joining us this week. It's a really good experience. Hope you'll join us again at some point in the future. And Joel, are any final thoughts you want to throw into the mix?
No, I think we've covered it all, and I'm hoping that right now there's somebody out there listening who is thinking about running, whatever political party it is that you want to run for. Just think it over and make the right decision based on why it is that you want to run, and do the work and reach out to people. Hear what they want to see better in their communities.
Get involved in politics because you get involved. Be a volunteer for a good long time and work your ass off for a good long time before you think about being a damn candidate.
Yeah. And realize it's not just about you. It's about a lot more than just you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thanks again, everybody. And we'll be back next week with more from the 905er. Bye for now.
Bye.
That's it for this episode of the 905er. Thank you for listening. As always, you can send us your feedback, thoughts, and concerns or ideas for future episodes to our email, info@905er.ca. We'd love to hear from you. You can help us keep the 905er going by financially supporting us through Patreon as well as PayPal. Visit us at 905er.ca and click on the support tab. As well, links are in the show notes for your convenience. Lastly, you can find us on social media. Search for _905er on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So long for now. See you next time.
looking to make the most out of this life and optimize your personal wellness? Then check out the Natural Man Podcast. Join me, host Mike C., as we explore all areas of human wellness, physical, mental, and emotional. Learn strategies to optimize your own well-being and be in the driver's seat of your own health. Remember, your doctor works for you. Learn biohacks, neurohacks, ways to improve sleep, and ways to optimize your body and your mind. Check us out on Apple, Spotify, the Fountain app, and at naturalmanpodcast.com.